Hi everyone. Look, in today's video, we're going to be learning how to write an economics essay, or at least some of the basic principles behind that. So look, I think for a lot of people, a lot of the only prior essay experience they've had might have been English. Now, writing an economics essay is a little bit different to English, in terms of what the marker is expecting. However, there are a couple of similarities and kind of basic principles that do follow both. And today's video, I'll be kind of giving you some points on what the markers are looking for, what to keep in mind. All right, so I've got some basic points here, and then we're going to be going through an essay to kind of put those points into practice and how that's going to look like for an A range response in this case. Okay, so the essay question firstly, just a bit of context, assess the effectiveness of micro reform in achieving economic growth, full employment, and plus stability. So these are the topic three objectives here. So this is a very classic essay question relating topic 4 and topic 3, and I like to do them a lot. So the main structure it's going to be an introduction. It's going to be then 2 to 4 body paragraphs. I'm just going to say 3 body paragraphs, depending on really what the question is, kind of the parameters of the question. In this case, because it's achieving economic growth, full employment, and price stability, it seems reasonable to do a body paragraph on each of those discrete categories there. And that's going to be kind of, I'll get to that, but body paragraphs when I get there. But we'll start with the introduction, right? 3 main things in the introduction, really 2 main things, right? So the first one is we've got to answer the question, and it must include the words of the question. So as you can see in blue, I've answered the question here. So micro reforms within the Australian economy have had mixed effectiveness. Now, I've said mixed effectiveness, and a lot of the top students are generally going to do this with an analyze, assess, or evaluate question. The reason is because you get to provide a bit of nuance and you get to provide both sides of the argument. So that is something I would recommend, not saying it's been completely effective or it's been completely ineffective. The best responses tend to give a bit of nuance and a bit on both sides, because that seems like a proper evaluation or assessment. So I've answered the question with keywords from the question, as you can see. And then after that, I'm going to be going on and kind of giving my roadmap, right? Which is just outlining your body paragraphs sequentially or in order. So as you can see, that's what I've done here. So in terms of what my body paragraphs are going to be, the marker will be able to see specifically the decentralization and deregulation of key factor markets, including labor and finance. So markers can see, okay, those are what his discrete body paragraphs are going to be on. And then a gradual reduction in protection levels under the NCP. So even though I did say you could structure it in terms of economic objectives, starting with growth, unemployment, price stability, the way this essay has been written is that we're going to break it up into key factor and product markets. So look, that's probably the toughest bit of the essay, seeing how can I logically set up my body paragraphs in order. And then I finished off with a bit of a broader however sentence, right? Now the point of this however is to give a bit of nuance and to also provide a bit of context of what's going on. I speak about Australia's decade of complacency, which furthers the imperative to, continually reform. Okay, so it's very short, right? Just think about what are the objectives of each paragraph. So roadmap, or answer the question firstly, then roadmap. And then you can give a however sentence at the end if you want. All right, now background. Now, background is different to an introduction. We know what the objectives of an introduction are, but a background is different. It's just to essentially flex your economic knowledge to the marker, right? So that involves key definitions, key rationales, key indicators, and possibly any trends or policy responses if required. So as you can see, you can see in my background paragraph that I'm incorporating a lot of key terminology. Now, this is really what separates, I'm going to underline all the key terminology. This is really what separates the A range responses, is their ability to use really maximize terminology. Now, there's no point going overboard, obviously, but as you can see, it's about eloquent use of terminology where you can. And that is going to separate you from other students, increasing aggregate supply, hence an economy's productive capacity. I talk about some of the impacts of micro reform here as well. Okay, so that's the background. It can tend to be a little bit longer like this, depending on what the question is. This is just what was written for this paragraph. Okay, body paragraphs. Now, as I kind of alluded to before, how you choose what to write in each body paragraph, it's very question dependent. Here are some common structures. You've got IBG, individual business government. You've got aggregate demand, 86, which is CIGXM. Maybe it was just an economic growth question. That's a pretty common one. And then you've also got objectives listed in the question. This is the one I kind of alluded to before. Economic growth, priceability, employment, or it could be distribution of income wealth. Now, a variety of other ideas exist, right? Now, what is important is that you don't have to stick to any of these. The whole point is that can your essay follow a logical progression from discrete idea to discrete idea? So you've got your ideas and they want to relate back to your overall thesis or point, which is the very first sentence you write in your introduction. Everything should be going back to that, essentially. Now, in terms of the way you argue in economics, you want to essentially provide the theory and then some sort of evidence or contemporary. Now, how is that going to look? I'll just go through my body paragraph example here. And you see, in terms of principles, we're starting with the kind of introductory sentence to ease the market into what this discrete paragraph is going to be talking about. So we know it's specifically financial market reforms. And then what follows in purple after my introduction sentence is almost a bit of a contextual understanding of what was going on, how this microeconomic reform looked in the financial markets. So we're talking about accessibility of capital through the granting of licenses for banks. That's kind of my cause, right? In some sort of sense. And then this is kind of the effects, even though explain is cause and effects, analyze and assess and evaluate can kind of be that, but we've got to provide a kind of analytical or judgmental thing on the top of that. So yeah, this kind of gives some of the explanation of some of the sort of reasoning or what happened in the financial market reforms. Now what I want to find is, in terms of how to argue, going to my point of a synthesis of economic theory and contemporary. Now, what you can say is this also effectuated decreasing operational cost, mitigating cost push inflation. Now, ideally, you would say this is evidenced by, and you would provide some sort of stat, right? 3% reduction in inflation or something like that from this year to this year. So that could be how this paragraph would improve as well. And importantly, to really hit that analytical or evaluative or judgmental aspect of this, you have to provide a kind of counter argument, right? Provide a counter argument. So this is what you just do, however. So I talk about increased susceptibility to international shocks because we integrated all these foreign banks, right? And what I've actually done, I've given kind of a counter argument to that argument, or what was done in response to that. So that is another opportunity to provide a bit of nuance. Yeah, and then once again, I finish up with a kind of conclusion sentence. And notice how it's in blue as well to my linking sentence. It's very similar to my initial sentence. It's about these sentences are for the flow of the essay, right? For it to essentially flow from logical, discrete idea to idea. All of those ideas, once again, backing up your entire thesis or your body or your main idea of the whole essay. All right, and then the conclusion is very similar to an introduction. It can be slightly shorter. As you can see, it has a very similar introductory sentence to my introduction. What this one doesn't have is some sort of really quick roadmap. Once again, just mentioning the two factor markets, labour, financial, and products markets, NCP and trade industry. We can just mention them really briefly, like brief roadmap sentence. In this case, I didn't even do it, and you could probably get away with it, but I think it's good principle to give a really brief roadmap sentence summing up what was had. And then once again, a really broad, however, just put it into context of what's really going on. Once again, I mentioned Australia's recent decade of complacency is a big issue that we should focus on moving forward. So in essence, this last sentence is somewhat prospective, moving, I guess, a bit of a forward-looking thing. Yeah, so those are the main points in terms of how to write an economics essay. There could be more videos on this in the future with a couple more tips, but I think this is a good start and good length of the video. All right, thanks, guys.